The darkest moments of most scary mysteries are when the creepy backstories have endings that are most unexpected and disturbing. But these 5 mysteries are scary because the cases are unsolved, making them even more shocking with each passing year. Number 5. The mysterious disappearance of Lynn Schultz is a strange case that has gone unsolved even decades later. And during the past 50 years, friends and family had to endure a real-life horror story, trying to understand the scary mystery of what happened to their loved one. Lynn was 18 years old when she vanished without a trace under strange circumstances. Over the years, there have been many alleged missing person sightings and many theories about what might have happened to her. But none of the answers have been proven. Lynn was in her first year of college when she went missing. She lived in Simsbury, Connecticut, and was the second oldest child with 4 siblings. She aced her exams and was accepted into a private liberal arts school, Middlebury College, in 1971. A few of Lynn's high school peers would also be going to Middlebury, and Lynn was also excited about meeting new people. When she wasn't traveling back home on the weekends to visit friends and family, she made sure to call home once a week and sometimes would write letters up to twice a week. Despite studying hard, she soon was falling behind on her grades. She told friends she didn't think the lectures were important, and she would have preferred to absorb the material alone. She told her parents she wanted to drop out of school, but decided to keep going. Lynn's strange mystery began shortly after December 8, 1971, the day after she had enrolled for the spring semester. She called her mother that day and seemed happy about the future. She was enthusiastic about coming home for Christmas break, too. On the day she went missing, December 10th, Lynn was behaving strangely, even for someone stressing about her final exams. At about 12:30 p.m., 30 minutes before her test, she was spotted by another student off campus about a mile's walk from her dorm, eating dried prunes at the Vermont Transit Authority bus terminal, next to a health food store. She told her fellow students that she had just missed the bus to New York, and together they went back to campus. From there, the case diverges into 2 scary stories, and investigators still aren't sure which is true. Lynn was supposed to walk to the exam with another student in her class, but Lynn went back alone to find her favorite pen, and then mysteriously disappeared somewhere along the way. In another version of events, Lynn's classmate went back with her and waited outside her dorm until 12:55 p.m., at which point she went inside and discovered Lynn was missing, and had to rush to the exam so she didn't miss it herself. In both cases, Lynn was absent from the exam. This wasn't the last sighting of Lynn, though. At 2:15 p.m., she was spotted again near the bus station. The person who remembers seeing Lynn did not know her before that day, but they politely chatted for a while. This was the final known encounter with Lynn that case detectives knew of before she went missing. The unexplained disappearance took days to be noticed by Lynn's roommate, who had left the next morning to go home for Christmas. A few days afterwards, Lynn's friends still hadn't heard from her, and they contacted the campus security. By the time Lynn's parents were informed about their missing daughter's strange disappearance, even more days had passed. At first, local police were not quick to investigate the mysterious disappearance of Lynn, because they believed that they knew what had happened to her. Detectives thought she had disappeared of her own accord and that she would be back soon. Lynn's mother was certain the case would go unsolved without their help. A month later, there was still no sign of Lynn. When police believed she had disappeared to start a new life, her desperate family agreed to make a public appeal for information to try to solve this scary mystery. They received a large number of missing person sightings of Lynn, reported around the New England area, but none of the alleged sightings were confirmed to be Lynn. Perhaps in part due to a rather generic description of someone petite with shoulder-length straight blonde hair and acne scars. Still, her family knew that the mysterious disappearance of Lynn was not voluntary, because even though she dreamed about vanishing in the past, there was no way the same student who rode back twice a week at college would suddenly go missing for this long without notifying them of her whereabouts. The case went cold and gradually lost attention. One of the early theories put forward was that Lynn had joined a hippie movement. But as years passed and there was no sign of her, it seemed less likely that she would ever be found alive. Her parents never found out what happened to her, but they have a few stories they think could be true. Given Lynn's strange behavior in the hours leading up to her disappearance, Lynn's family believes that foul play was involved. Lynn had no known enemies. She wasn't in a relationship at the time of her vanishing, but she had been meeting lots of different people in the area. Any of these people could have the missing information needed to solve her unsolved disappearance, but no specific persons of interest were ever identified. Lynn's sisters tried to keep the case alive, and in 2011 made a public appeal for information to try to solve this mystery. A year later, police received an anonymous tip that added a new dark and disturbing backstory to this already scary mystery. According to police, a notorious individual named Robert Durst now owned the health food store Lynn was seen outside the day she vanished. The true story of Robert Durst, a real estate agent worth millions, has since been popularized by a Netflix show called The Jinx. The man was found responsible for taking the lives of at least one person, and very likely many others, in a barrage of unsolved mysteries that have yet to be explained. Robert's first wife, Kathleen McCormick, disappeared in 1982. In 2000, his friend Susan Berman passed away, and the following year in 2001, his neighbor also had his life taken. Robert claimed self-defense against his neighbor, but after the Netflix true crime documentary, the case looked very different. Robert accidentally made a shocking criminal confession caught on a live microphone while talking to himself in the bathroom. This evidence was enough for him to be found guilty of taking Susan's life, and he was facing trial in the disappearance of his wife when he passed away. There's been no evidence to concretely prove that Robert had encountered Lynn, or even that he knew her. Although he did own the health food store that she was standing outside of, it could have been under old ownership at the time. A property that had once been owned by Robert was searched, but nothing that helped the case was found. Lynn's case remains unsolved, and her loved ones are left asking what happened to her and why. Number 4. The unsolved mystery of Michael Rosenblum's disappearance is a scary story with a creepy backstory and an unexpected ending you'll never guess. Michael was just 25 years old when he disappeared. It was 1980, and for years Michael had been struggling with addiction after meeting a doctor in Jersey Shore, where the family had a summer home, who would heavily overprescribe medication. On February 13th, after getting traffic violations and multiple rehabilitation programs, he was kicked out of the house to live with his girlfriend and her mother. Lisa Scherer was a former model who he had met during his latest stint in rehab. She was dealing with her own problems at the time, but also tried to look after Michael. On February 14th, Lisa took Michael to the hospital because his eyes kept rolling back in his head. Michael refused treatment and eventually left. He, Lisa, and Lisa's 3-year-old daughter drove towards the Rosenblum house in Pittsburgh. Lisa hit a curb and stopped at a gas station to check her tires. Michael demanded to drive and promptly collided with the wire anchoring a telephone pole. Michael said he needed to borrow the car and would meet her at his parents' house in 2 hours. Nobody knows what happened to Michael since. Lisa didn't go to the Rosenblum home, but rather a hospital where she admitted herself to a psychiatric ward. The following day, she called Michael's mother to ask about him. He hadn't returned to Lisa's home, and the car was also still missing. She immediately filed a missing person report. The Pittsburgh Police Department started their investigation straight away by issuing a description of Michael and the missing car. For months, there was no activity on Michael's bank account. Maurice, Michael's father, did get a strange phone call, but he thought it was a prank. The mysterious person on the other end said Michael had been arrested, then abruptly hung up. 3 months after Michael's unsolved disappearance, Lisa's car was found in a tow shop in the neighboring town of Baldwin. It had been impounded there since the day Michael went missing. Less than 2 hours after he was last seen by Lisa, 2 police officers had come across the abandoned vehicle on River Road with 2 flat tires and damaged rims. Police discovered that Lisa had been in the hospital when it was found, but never informed her. The tow shop owner had been hoping to get rid of the vehicle when he discovered it was listed as stolen and part of a missing persons case. It was only then that Lisa and the Rosenblums were informed. The following day was May 22nd. Baldwin Police Chief Aldo Gaburi began a search of the area surrounding River Road. Nothing was found, however, there were reports that Aldo wouldn't allow certain parts of the area to be searched, including a place called 40 Acres. Not long after this, Maurice received another mysterious phone call. This time, the anonymous caller said Michael had been arrested by Baldwin police. Maurice began a personal investigation to find out who was responsible for his son's disappearance. An investigation that would cost $250,000 and go on his entire life without finding answers. In 1981, he put pressure on the New Jersey governor to take action against Michael's crooked doctor, who voluntarily surrendered his medical license. However vindicating this may have felt, it didn't help solve the mystery. Trying to figure out why it had taken the Baldwin police so long to return the car to Lisa was the first part of the criminal investigation by Pittsburgh police. Baldwin claimed they had sent a letter to Lisa informing her the car had been impounded and produced a copy signed by Chester Lombardi, one of the officers that had found the car. The letter had suddenly gotten lost in the mail. Given the fact Baldwin was informed about the missing car after this letter was supposedly sent, it didn't explain why they hadn't contacted Pittsburgh police about the development in the case. But this was only the beginning of the Baldwin Police Department's strange behavior. On July 15th, Baldwin Police Department put out a warrant for Michael's arrest as a criminal suspect in a pharmacy robbery. The police sketch closely matched the photo used in Michael's missing person flyers, but didn't quite match the person who had committed the robbery. Witnesses could only describe his chin and forehead because he was wearing large glasses. The culprit in this case was later identified, confessed to the crime, and claimed Michael had nothing to do with it. The artist had apparently somehow used samples of Michael's eyes and other features to complete the sketch. Michael's unsolved disappearance went cold again until 1986, when Maurice received an anonymous letter telling him to speak to a mystery woman named Jean Haslett, who had worked as a dispatcher for the Baldwin PD. Her information only added to the creepy backstory. 2 months after Lisa's car was discovered, Aldo Gaburi had asked clerk Fred Capelli to write a letter to Lisa to inform her that the car had been found, and to backdate it to the day after Michael had disappeared. He then asked the 2 officers who had found the car to sign. They refused as it had already been backdated. When they refused, he had the clerk forge Officer Lombardi's signature. When confronted, Fred made a criminal confession. In 1987, the local trial held a hearing in which Jean, Fred, and others testified against Aldo, who was dismissed as a result, but later reinstated after an appeal. The appeal found that the witnesses in the first hearing hadn't been reliable. With little progress being made, Maurice took his case to the Unsolved Mysteries TV show. The show aired a segment on Michael's disappearance, but Baldwin PD refused to participate. About this time, a police officer named George Gallowich was discovered to have been responsible for the anonymous letter that had sent Maurice to Jean. The producers of Unsolved Mysteries left a voice message on George's answering machine, asking for him to make an appearance on the show. Minutes later, they received a call back from someone claiming to be George, who refused an interview and told them not to come to Baldwin to film. It would later turn out this had actually been George's roommate, another Baldwin police officer. 2 hours later, George was suspended from the police force and would later lose his job. The TV show resulted in hundreds of missing person tips, but none of them solved the mysterious disappearance. In 1992, Maurice and Barbara were informed that a hiker had found Michael's missing remains at 40 Acres. It was the same place that the police chief would not let crime investigators search. The rest of his remains have never been found, and what forensic evidence they did find wasn't enough to determine the cause of his demise. Maurice would pass away 16 years later without the answers to this mystery. It's unknown if Baldwin PD were trying to cover up a simple clerical error or something much more sinister in this unsolved case. Aldo Gaburi has since passed away, but it's possible that someone else with answers may still be alive, and the crime story could eventually be solved. Number 3. The mysterious disappearance of James Tedford is one of the strangest missing person cases ever to go unsolved. The scary mystery is made even scarier by the fact that James possibly went missing within the Bennington Triangle, which describes a cluster of mysterious Vermont disappearances from 1945 to 1950. James was a 68-year-old veteran in 1949, living in a care home at the time of his mysterious disappearance. This home was in Bennington, a lengthy journey from where his wife lived in St. Albans with her sister and brother-in-law. James was described as despondent and extremely thin, weighing only 116 pounds. According to the story told by other residents, when he left in late November of 1949, he told them he wouldn't be coming back. He had gone to visit his wife Pearl in St. Albans. December 1st was time for him to return home. The bus trip back was delayed by heavy snow, and it was 8 p.m. by the time they had reached the town of Brandon, the last stop before Bennington. There were 15 passengers left on the bus, including James, who was asleep. A few hours later, the bus arrived in Bennington. Passengers filed off of the bus, but James was not with them. He had apparently vanished into thin air. His luggage was still in the luggage compartment, and a timetable now lay open on his empty seat. Nobody reported James missing until a week later, when his family realized he hadn't returned to the nursing home. Police traced him back to the bus and uncovered a strange mystery. The other passengers were certain that James had still been on the bus when they left Brandon. If he had vanished between stops, it had likely been while the bus was traveling down Route 7 through the Green Mountain Wilderness area. The area has become known as the Bennington Triangle. A year to the day before James went missing, 18-year-old Paula Jean Weldon disappeared while on a walk in the same area. Paula was the second person associated with the Bennington Triangle mystery, the first being a 74-year-old woman who went missing in 1985. In 1950, 2 more people vanished. Only one person, the final victim of the mysterious triangle, was ever found. The Bennington Triangle theory was one that had been discussed as early as 1950. On the anniversary of James's disappearance, the Daily Messenger, a local newspaper, did a story outlining the 5 mysterious disappearances. On James's case, the paper stated, quote, "The quest for the missing veteran, Tedford, has remained clueless, without even a starting point." There had been some sightings of the missing person early in the investigation. The bus driver described an elderly man getting off the bus in Brandon. Later, a taxi driver in the city described an elderly man wearing an army overjacket and a beret who was acting odd. There were other sightings of a man matching James's description around the same area, but none were confirmed. There isn't a lot of information about James before he disappeared, but he may have had dementia. It's not known how serious he had been when he told others at the care home that he wasn't going to return. But if the newspaper descriptions of despondent and lonely were accurate, he may have ended his life himself. The lack of information has led to a number of other scary stories to help explain the mystery. Some sources claim that James could not have been visiting his wife Pearl because she herself had vanished years earlier. James came home one day to find her gone without a trace. If he was having memory problems, then the only traces left of his missing wife were in his mind. James's case remains unsolved and will likely remain that way, but his association with the Bennington Triangle means his case will never be forgotten. Number 2. A vacation from work had a terrible and unexpected ending for John Maeschian and his wife Carol. A disturbing, real-life horror story that remains unsolved to this day. John mysteriously disappeared from his hotel room sometime around midday on February 11, 1980. His missing body was found a few hours later, blocking a door to a stairwell after what police described as a professional job. The son of an Armenian cobbler, John was a wealthy mortgage broker who, with his brother, had started a successful business based in Reno, Nevada, decades earlier. John was in Miami that winter to attend a savings and loans convention at a local hotel, which had posh reputation marred by rising crime stories in recent years. John was joined by his wife, Carol, on his trip, who had a short criminal record shoplifting. He was busy with paperwork when Carol last saw him. Charts and papers spread across the table as Carol kissed him on the cheek and left for the pool at 10:30 a.m. She expected him to come down and join her when he finished in a few hours, but the unexpected ending she'd receive was a scary mystery instead. By 12:15 in the afternoon, John was still missing, and Carol decided to call the room to check in on him, but he didn't reply. She called again a short while later to no avail. At 2 p.m., Carol went back to their room on the 5th floor of the 17-story hotel. The door was locked, and when Carol knocked, she got no response. She had to go to reception and have a staff member let her into the room. Inside, John was missing, nowhere to be found. The papers were still on the tabletop, along with John's glasses, but there was no note left for her or anything else. This was very out of character, but Carol assumed he would be back soon. She ordered lunch for two and ate alone. As the hours wore on, Carol began to get worried that something might have happened to him. It wasn't like John to just vanish without telling anybody, especially as he had the room key and knew Carol was waiting for him. It was a strange mystery that she couldn't wait to solve and be over with. It was 6:20 p.m. when his body was found by staff in the stairwell. A nylon cord was around his neck. An investigation into the case quickly found this dark and disturbing mystery had happened in the hotel room hours ago. He had been approached from behind and quickly taken out, an extremely uncommon method, the likes of which the FBI said that they hadn't seen in the last 16 years. It would have taken only a few seconds for John to pass out, and a few minutes to never wake up. The criminal then dragged John from his hotel room to the stairs and left him there for reasons unknown. Up until that point, Carol and John had never seen anybody else on the 5th floor, and Carol would later say it was like having the hotel to themselves. Now it seemed like the criminal had taken advantage of that same solitude to move John's body without being seen. Carol was taken to the hospital for shock after she was told what had happened. When she returned, she found herself a suspect in the crime. There was little evidence at the scene of their hotel. Even after using chemicals to highlight bodily fluids that had been shed, only a small amount of John's saliva was found on the carpet. Half a dozen fingerprints belonging to an unidentified individual were discovered, but police were never able to find a database match. They suspected whoever had done this was a professional criminal who had been hired to take out John for some reason. The widow seemed like the obvious employer of such an individual. Carol had signed a nuptial agreement when she married John, agreeing that she would only get 25% of his estate if he were to pass away. However, John had a total of 8 children from his 3 previous marriages to take care of. So while he was a millionaire, 25% of his estate didn't seem like enough to take his life for, especially as she could continue to live the life of luxury with him. There were rumors that John planned to divorce her, but Carol insisted their marriage was stable. The day before the crime took place, the front desk had received a mysterious phone call for Carol, and they had taken a message for her. It said Dick and Jeannie will be arriving in Miami tomorrow at 12:30. The front desk claimed that they passed on that message. Carol said she never got it and didn't know the 2 people that it referred to. Carol was given 2 lie detector tests. She had no knowledge of any plot to take John's life and passed both tests. While the message was definitely a strange component of this story, it seems unlikely it truly referred to the crime. John was supposed to join Carol by the pool at noon, before the time specified in the message, and Carol called John at 12:15. If the crime was supposed to take place at 12:30, it doesn't make sense for her to call before that point. No other suspects or persons of interest were ever identified in the unsolved case. John had no known enemies, and nobody ever came forward with information. It's possible the crime may have had something to do with John's work, for in January of that year, John had put together loans for a condominium deal for some clients who had allegedly been involved in a scheme to artificially raise the cost of their properties. This alone wouldn't cause much suspicion, but a few months later, one of the clients allegedly approached a security guard and asked him to take out another business partner. If the guard's story is true, the client later changed his mind about his criminal proposal. The client himself later passed away in a single car accident, which the coroner believed was caused by foul play. None of John's clients were ever officially connected to his strange unsolved case. Carol and the 5 oldest of John's children tried to sue the hotel for negligence, but the jury found that the hotel couldn't be responsible for a crime that had taken place in a private hotel room. In a news article about the lawsuit, one of John's sons said he believed the person responsible would never be found. So far, that prediction has been accurate. The scary mystery remains unsolved. Number 1. The 1951 Atlantic C-124 plane disappearance is one of the strangest aviation mysteries that currently remains unsolved. Whether this was a tragic accident or something more sinister has never been determined for certain, and the families of the men aboard the plane are still demanding answers for this scary mystery. There were 53 men aboard the C-124 as it took off for its final journey across the Atlantic. Even though it was carrying 2 tanks and highly trained specialists, the plane had a surprising lack of security while stationed around various U.S. Air Force bases, and it was often left completely alone for long periods of time. The plane left Walker Air Force Base in Roswell, New Mexico, on the morning of March 21, 1951. The eventual destination was supposed to be a Royal Air Force Base in England, allegedly for a routine inspection. The UK was an important ally for the US in the developing Cold War, and the new 7th Air Group had been assigned to England. The commanding officer for the group, Brigadier General Paul T. Cullen, was one of the passengers, along with many other high-ranking personnel. Cullen had an extensive career and was best known for his intelligence-gathering roles, in particular a highly valuable spy photographer. For the first 8 hours over the ocean, nothing odd was reported. The plane flew over weather ships and would routinely send its position to the ships below. The last routine message came in at 1:06 GMT on March 23, 1951, Good Friday. It's at this point that the strange mystery splits into 2 stories. According to the official Air Force report, there were no further messages from the C-124. If this story is true, then only when they were overdue in England was a search team dispatched. Other reports state that a Mayday message was sent about flaming cargo that needed to be ejected from the hull. When that didn't solve the issue, the pilot decided to bring the plane down while there was still enough daylight. The plane was safely ditched in the Atlantic, several hundred miles west of Ireland. In both versions of the story, a B-29 was sent to search for the plane and any survivors. According to the Air Force, it found an overturned life raft and nothing more. But in other versions of the mystery, the B-29 found the crew and passengers equipped with food, warm weather clothes, and other survival gear. The plane itself didn't have anything to help rescue the men, and kept circling until they had to eventually refuel. The men were left alone in the middle of the ocean until a day later, when a ship arrived at the scene to rescue them. However, the men had vanished without a trace and were nowhere to be found. Over the next few hours and days, more ships joined the search for the missing plane, and the 53 men who had strangely disappeared with it. Much of what was found was partially burned wreckage to suggest there had been a fire on the surface of the water, but a further investigation found it was likely the plane that had remained intact. 2 inflated tires from the cargo would have been found on the water's surface if the plane had been torn apart. They too had disappeared. After a few days of searching, despite no signs of the men, and seemingly no traces of recovering them, a UK submarine joined the search, as well as more ships and planes. The search only intensified until weeks later when the operation was quietly stopped. The scary mystery has since only been made more confusing by the conflicting reports of what happened next. The families of the missing men believe more is known about the fate of the C-124 than has been revealed. It's now known that there were Soviet submarines operating in the area, and it's been theorized that the men were captured and brought back to the USSR. If this did happen, they wouldn't be the only American soldiers to be sent to Russia during the Cold War. Another theory suggests that a nuclear device was being transported aboard the plane. This would explain why there was an extra-large search effort to recover the missing device. Possibly the strangest addition to this backstory came in April of 1951. An Irish farmer found a sealed can on a beach on Ireland's west coast. Inside was a mysterious note that would later be published in Irish and British newspapers. The note reads, quote, "Cullen is worried when 300 miles west of Ireland. Globemaster alters course for no apparent reason. We are going north. Have to be careful. We are under surveillance. Pieces of wreckage will be found, but are not of G-Master. A terrible drama is being enacted in this liner." The farmer was thought to be a decent man who had no reason to perpetrate a hoax. That didn't necessarily mean the note was authentic, but it did add another layer to this already strange event. It's likely this is one scary mystery that could someday be solved, though the answers may be even more disturbing than the unknown. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.